Hello there, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. We have a really fun guest today from Chicago, Maiden King. They're going to play some songs for us. We're going to talk about the music industry, into the business side of things, how things work, and how everybody's trying to make it happen for themselves. So we appreciate you joining. If you're here so far, give us a subscribe. It helps go a long way. Take it away, guys.
Out on the lakes, the shore longs for the sea, but the ocean only asks for time. Make no mistake, the dirt beneath your feet, this bare geography is mine. I've been running my fingers for the line and wanting the answers left behind, and finding a puzzle piece of mind where only the rain gets inside. Fire gave to flood, the soil and the blood, the only gift it needs. So cut it open, run from what you see. This ugliness in me is mine. Oh, I've been running my fingers o'er the line and wanting the answers left behind, and finding a puzzle piece of mind where only the rain gets inside. Or push or to linger o'er the line, to hold to the questions left behind, or to live as a puzzled peace of mind that gathers the rain, rest inside.
Love that one. That's a really fun one to start with there. All right, question. There's that little middle section. Is that improv'd out every night, or you guys have that pretty set up?
There's always a little room for improv in
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I see. I feel like that would be a great section to stretch. But, let's hear another one, actually. This is great.
Something's building over, coming after all my guts. I thought I'd never be this, thought I'd never see it. But when nothing comes enough, the rigmarole of acting tough, I swore I'd never be this, swore I'd never be this again. This isn't the world we unwind. You can't keep it all this time. It's never enough in my mind. It's never enough. Secrets coming off. Never once did I begin to think I'd ever need it. No one wants to leave. They said don't wanna waste it all. They've been shown they're only small. Whenever we believe it, whenever we believe it. This isn't the world we unwind. You can't keep it all this time. It's never enough in my mind. It's never enough. It's never enough in my mind. It's never enough.
Another banger. That drum beat that came in there after the first break, that was pretty impressive. I really like that one. Tell us your name. Give us a little bit of quick background about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Jake Haverlack. The name of the band is Maiden King. I'm from, the thing I kind of say is I was Santa Fe born, Chicago bred. And yeah, I've been doing it 10 years or so in the Midwest now. Or 15 in the Midwest, 10 years in Chicago now.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you told me you went to school for jazz bass, right?
For upright, yeah.
Upright bass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the
okay,
big bass.
so the real bass.
Yeah, the real
I guess,
bass.
as some might say. I don't know. It depends who's out there, right? So then you got to Chicago.
I moved to Chicago initially. There was a band there was a band I was in school, and some of those guys had moved up to Chicago, so I kind of followed that. And my current girlfriend had moved up there. We were kind of on a sabbatical, but I had some ideas that paid off.
That's good. That's a great, especially if it's been 10 years. Congrats.
Yeah, I mean, we're 15 years all told now.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, so tell me a little about these tunes we just heard. Tell us the names of those.
So the first one we played was a song called Peace of Mind. It's the next single we've got coming out on April 8th. And the second one we played, the working title right now is Rigmarolling. That's going to be one of the batch of like the next record proper.
Very cool. So I think this is a great story. Tell me about how these kind of tunes came about.
First one we played is a really old song at this point. It actually predates. We put a record out in 2023. I kind of made that record to like figure out how to produce and sort of figure out how to like be a band leader and all of that. I was lucky enough to get a grant from the Center for Cultural Affairs in Chicago, a DCASE grant in 2024 that got me some new gear. And I didn't really want to figure out the gear on somebody else's dime. That's kind of what I told myself.
Oh, man.
And so this EP that we're going to be putting out later this year, which that song is a part of, was a bunch of tunes that predate the first record by a long shot. I had like kind of tried to make them once upon a time and like didn't quite connect with the arrangements, didn't quite connect with like how the tunes were shaping up. And as much as I love playing with these guys, the other thing with this project, this EP that's coming out, is I wanted somewhat stubbornly to do pretty much all of it myself. So I did all the production, all the performances, and then all the mixing. And then the mastering was the one stage that I like handed off and was like, all right, at this point.
I think that's a good stage, though. I mean, we do the same here, actually. We do produce, record, mix, and then having a different set of ears on the master, I think, can really help.
Totally.
So,
and I just didn't have like the space for it and whatnot. You know,
course.
It's like I really respect that you got to have like the right gear and ears for that.
It is. It's like a dark arts, right?
Yeah.
Still, even to us who know music, still is like, what is mastering and why is it so amazing?
Totally.
Tell me a little bit about this grant. So did you have to apply for it?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's a grant that they offer to people who've been living in Chicago for, I think you've got to live there for at least a year or two. You've got to have like a proof of address. For the most part, it's pretty free range, like whatever goes. You know, you can, whether you're a filmmaker, a dancer, a musician, an artist, this or that. There's a lot of different tiers. You can get money to put on a big show. You can get money to make a record. You can get music videos. There's all kinds of things that you can do with it. And I actually, the grant that I spent like 2 months working on a grant to get some money for us to go on tour. And the day before the grant was due, I read the fine print that they don't give it unless you have confirmed dates. And so there was no time to do that. And then while I was combing through the fine print, I found this other part that was like investment in artistic space. And so I spent like 4 more hours in the coffee shop that day and crammed out the grant that I was able to then get.
So you had the studio space, but then obviously you got this grant money to fill it out with gear, right? And it gave you the opportunity to experiment with that gear. Can you tell us a few bits of gear that you got with this grant?
Yeah, definitely. I saw you guys had the Heritage, the HA73 stereo pre. I got one of those. Like some nicer mic stands. I got a couple Stager microphones, the ribbon mics, the SR2N, I think they're called, like a match pair. And then I got a Lauten Atlantis, which was just like a better vocal mic than what I was used to. Like, the new music that's about to come out was made with, just these couple pieces of gear that I was able to get.
You also told me that you played all of the instruments. Is that that's also true? Because granted, this is some complicated music, I'd say. Maybe some would, some wouldn't, right? But there's a lot of really cool parts here, and you studied bass, but you're obviously able to be proficient in all of those things. Plus, is this one of the first things you mixed? Because I thought these mixes were quite clean and sounded great.
Yeah, thank you. So I had mixed a couple other projects before this. Great songwriter, a friend of mine, Jacob Humber in Chicago. He was sort of the first one to kind of give me the courage to mix it. I mean, the real turning point, while the point of today is like resources for other musicians, there's this really incredible online organization called the School of Song that is run out of LA that I've taken a bunch of different classes for. I got into them because the first class I took was a songwriting workshop with Robin Pecknold of Fleet Foxes. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, they did Adrian Lanker. Sam was in a bunch. Sam and I were just in the Brian Eno songwriting workshop they did in January. And then they've got a series that they've been doing with Philip Weinrobe, who's this incredible mixing engineer, where they had an audio and like a home recording one, and then they had a mixing class specifically. And it was really his mixing class that kind of gave me like the format or the template, for how to think about how to go about it,
Was this in Los Angeles, you said?
So they're based in LA, but it's completely online. So you can, and like the classes for the most part are pretty affordable. They usually last about a month. It's like $160 to $200, and if you sign up with a friend, you each get 20% off. So it's like,
I wish I would have heard about that. The Eno one sounds incredible.
The Eno one was absolutely incredible.
I mean, tell us a little bit about that too, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of known for his more avant-garde type approach to thinking, right, and decision making, is at least what I've read on the internet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, he's very idiosyncratic, and he's very, but he's also very. Can we swear on this? What's the?
I think we get one person each gets one swear word each.
All right, he's a no BS kind of guy.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
he's very like a very straight shooter, and he was sort of approaching the class, talking about a lot of his compositional methods, the oblique strategies and things like that, but kind of forgot in the course of the class, like, but he's produced for Bowie and U2 and Coldplay and like all these heavy hitters. His teaching style was very much about showing up and clocking in, and then getting out of your way, right? So having like a pretty methodical like schedule that you're trying to set, but still trying to stay like open and create, not just turn it into like a 9 to 5, but do have like the 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of like what I've heard and read of so many musicians, right? You need to treat it like a job every day. You need to sit down and like, even if you're not in the mood, not inspired, you still need to give it the hours, right? Otherwise, you can't just play when you're inspired, because then what if you're not? You sometimes have to push through that inspiration or lack of inspiration, because you'll find it, right? And I don't know. I've been playing for 20 some years of guitar, and some days like I hate when I'm playing, but I have to, keep playing to come out with some good things. And we can easily say to ourselves, "Oh, if I had a different guitar, then I'd play a lot better." But you might play something different. That's why I love different guitars. Is everyone I play differently. I don't know. Did you want to touch on any of that thing before I say something?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I found one of the most inspiring aspects of the way that Brian Eno approaches music in general is that he's interrogating what music is on every level and at every step of the process. He's always asking questions like, how can I turn this on its head? How can I completely alter my perspective to look at this differently and to yield a more interesting result, instead of just like showing up and doing what you always did? It's like, how can I switch this up? How can I, and it could be, like even in the Adrienne Linker class, she would talk about that kind of thing too. She's like, I just will tune the guitar until I find an interesting sound, and then I'm going to start here to write the next one. And it's just kind of, unlearning things and not leaning into your patterns as much. And there are times when that's like great to have the stuff to fall back on. You're like, I need to do this like right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's really fun. So a couple things. I know you're saying about tunings. That's one of those things that I think you can easily get yourself into a different headspace. Mm-hmm. I don't mess around with them as much, but I've had a funny experience where I wanted to do Dad Gad, and I accidentally did Dad Ad, like AAD.
Nice. Oh, cool.
And I'm like, what's happening? But this is so interesting. Yeah. I just made a mistake, but it I had an hour of fun that I didn't know I was going to have.
Yeah. Totally.
Because it was an accident. And Eno's a funny one. I don't know how much sidebar I want to go with Eno, because before I knew anything about him, you see pictures of him and he's like, looks like a very square dude. Like he looked like my friend's dad in middle school. Yes. And I'm like, this guy's super square. But when you see him in the 70s, his crazy outfits, I mean, he looked incredible, totally. Right? And just the idea of, him making his most atmospheric kind of quiet music when he lived in New York, because it was such a busy environment. He wanted a quiet space, and then he's making loud music when he's in a quiet space. And the idea of making, music for airports and films, because he was in the hospital and the music was so bad that it was driving him crazy. So he said, I want to find music that fills spaces that's actually enjoyable. So I think kind of like what you were saying, like just always challenging that status quo. And he's such an interesting person and has a huge back catalog.
The music for airports thing is a good point, because one of my favorite things that he said in the class, that's something I take to heart. We think a lot when we're making music about, what did Bowie call it? Playing to the galley. Bowie was like, don't play to the galley, right? Do your thing, never play out to the common people. And I don't know that I totally agree with that. I think it's an important thing to consider the audience. But Eno, the way he spoke of it was like, I want my music to be useful in some way. And I thought that was a really helpful approach to thinking about how to consider your audience without like pandering. Like what could this do for someone, as opposed to like, how can I get their streams, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a deep sidebar there, because I think there's so many people, artists, who can try to play to their audience, right? And I think the audience knows, right? If you're not genuine to yourself, and the audience can kind of feel that you're trying to be somebody else, even though that's a trendy sound, which is so, now the trends are changing so quickly, that if you chase that trendy sound, you're kind of behind. Doing what makes sense to you, and then hopefully that audience understands that, right? There's ethos on both sides. It's very Rick Rubin of me to say, when he's struck gold out for 40 years, right? He's found the way. It's a different world now, right, with the internet.
I think your point was interesting there. Giving people what they want. It's so hard to do that nowadays. We have like so many places to get music, but I don't know where to go to find stuff I want to listen to. And finding a way to give people what they're actually wanting to hear is tough nowadays. But I think, the Music for Airports, I love that record by and the idea of that's really cool. Here's where you're listening. Here's what's happening, and we'll give you that.
When I went to school for jazz, there's definitely some years in there where I was like really into some esoteric, avant-garde, people farting in saxophones kind of stuff. That I still am like, there is like Coltrane object, like he was searching for God in those sounds, it's like, and I feel like you hear and you feel that. But in some of those searches, I definitely like thumb my nose and kind of turn my back on like a lot of more like popular music. And it wasn't until I started to get into production that I really started to like, I'll never forget the first time I like set up my nice Sir monitors at home and had a lesson where somebody wanted to learn Roar by Katy Perry, and I was like, this snare is so good. Like it just hit me like a truck. I was like, man.
And the electric guitars at the end of that song, you can hear the feedback from the amp. And I'm like, that was such a cool choice by the mixing engineers.
And there's so many little nuggets in so many of these pop songs like that, where it's just like little kind of background textures that are there to sort of enhance the vibe. And the older I get, the more I like really want to remain a student of music. Yeah, kind of like Eno did, because he would push. If it was like a straighter band, he'd push them to do the weird stuff. And if they were a weird band, he'd push them to do the pops. He was always trying to kind of make sure that people were challenging themselves in some way. And I think keeping some of it's a little bit of each finger, each hand, some fingers on each hand in each realm is like the way to be,
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like the first Talking Heads album, pretty straight. Second to, third, fourth, however long, like huge stamp. Yeah. And then when he left, they still kind of had his approach, but it was a little different, right? They had obviously learned a ton from him. Great. So why don't you give us another tune? So you said the first song you played is coming out on 4/8, right?
Coming out on April 8th. Yep.
Excellent. Yep. And what was the name of that one again?
That one's called Peace of Mine.
Excellent. So you have this. How many songs are going to be on this EP? Do you have a release date for it?
We don't have a release date for the EP yet. I'm doing like a yin and yang thing with the EP, where there's one that those of you listening in, you've heard it already. It's very like electric and eclectic and hard. And then I have most of the foundations of another one tracked that's going to be much more stripped back and like layered orchestral stuff. Once that's done, that's when I'll kind of have a sense of like how I want to put them out. But I want to put them out together as like a, yin and yang thing.
Let's hear the next one.
Sweet. This next one's called Spilling, and it is going to be on this new EP. Back the curtains, cat runs from Opening up freedom in the earth. Opening up, yeah, don't belong here. My loneliness couldn't touch the ground, and my holiness only brought me down. So I'll take home in cozy, spread out on the floor. Oh, the weak and Sophie hangs above the door. I'm opening up. Opening up, there's a freedom in the earth. Opening up, yeah, don't belong here. No, I don't belong here.
That was a fun one too. Tell me a little bit about, you have a production suite, a studio space. You think they're kind of different things.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're in a studio now. There's a control room, and then there's a live room, and there's when I say production suite, I mean like it's all in one space. You know, I have a room. I'm trying to think what would be. I mean, it's probably maybe half the size of your control room, where I've got the drums, the amps, the synths, the pre's, the mics, all that stuff. Trying to make the most out of pretty small space.
So are you climbing over the drums and stuff to get in there?
No, I'll show you a picture after it. And the drums are kind of in the corner because I teach out of that space too. So it's all kind of crammed in there. But it's like the drums are in the left corner when you open the door, and then you walk in and there's the desk and everything. But I don't really have like mics set up, you know, unless I know I'm going to be tracking stuff across a couple of days. I'm pretty good about cleaning my room when I'm done.
Your mother maybe would be proud.
I hope so. Hi, Mom. I think she's listening to this.
Thanks for being here. And this is our episode, Candid Conversations with Professional Musicians. Thanks so much for joining. If you're joining for the first time, please give us a subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. We're really just trying to get in the heads of working musicians, professional musicians, you know, what they're doing to be successful and how they can, you know, maybe provide some tips to us here and to fellow listeners and bands that we work with and that are checking it out for themselves, because this is a difficult world in the digital age, right? And we're all trying to figure out what to do to break through, right? So tell me just a little bit about production, because I know we chat about this. I thought it was interesting. Right now, you're wearing a slightly different hat, you know, producing your albums. Are you starting to produce for other people?
Yeah. I did. The first record I did of the space was my friend Frankie Master. We did 7 or 8 song record, more or less entirely out of my room. My partner Jessica, she's got a great batch of tunes coming out that I've kind of helped more engineer than produce on that side. Cool. Her project's called Odd Blessings. A bunch of little like odds and ends kind of one-offs here and there. Yeah, and I mean it really varies. Like I think this, even before I did the Eno class, a lot of what was like dear to my heart about producing was trying to chase a little bit of reinvention or chase a little bit of surprise most of the time, you know. With like Frankie's record, when she came to me, she was kind of like a Norah Jonesy piano player or something like that, and wanted it to be more like lively. And so a lot of what was exciting about those arrangements was like figuring out how this would feel with like a band. I mean, I think I want to grow in some different directions, but I think the thing that is really true about a lot of the ways that I produce is like I'm very like arrangement forward. How would this feel to be played live, and then let that kind of inform the rest of the decisions, you know?
I love what you said when we had our pre-interview about production is, making 1,000 decisions, right? And it is, because you can really get into that decision fatigue quickly after, a couple hours of continually making choices, moving in certain directions, because every direction is taking you further away or towards a spot, right? And you'd make a left turn 2 miles ago, you might be in a completely different genre now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so fascinating. And I think if you want to touch on that, I'd love to hear your input.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of what I meant by that is like this. I hate to say this to the musicians listening, being like, how do we make this more affordable? But there is a little bit of truth sometimes to the gear piece of it, right? Like having stuff that you can rely on, having stuff that's quality, having things that you can trust the sound of on the way in. I noticed as I got some nicer gear, I was playing with my EQs, for instance, in more aggressive ways, because I was like, I'm mixing this. Let's just make this the sound now, and I don't have to like.
It's your fault to fix if it's not right.
Yeah, I mean, no, literally, like the first song we did on this, the Peace of Mind, the first song we played, when I was recording that, I did the vocals with 3 lines. I did like a close mic, I did a room mic, and then I was splitting the signal out to a guitar amp. And when I went down, I was like, at the time, I was like, what is this sound? This is cool. This is gonna be crazy. And when I went to mix, it was like all kinds of phase issues and this and that. And the more I leaned on like the psychedelic feeling of the track as it ended up being, the more I kind of realized, what I've heard other engineers talk about, which is like, yeah, you get your ears used to phase, and it's like, oh man, that's like bad. The picture of it could be clear or whatever. But in this case, I was like, oh, the phase thing is kind of like a sound and is like part of the sonic imprint on the vocals,
I think that's really cool. I mean, I think we chatted a little bit about this too, right? This idea of, sounds, good, bad, analog, digital, they kind of all have their place, and you can lean into them with what they are. You're not going to make your bedroom sound like Abbey Road, but your bedroom can sound cool, right? And that's part of the whole fun thing about production, is just using sounds for the beautiful things that they are, if they're not in somebody's eyes, right?
Yeah. And I think, the way, like, the best metaphor I have for music making a lot of the time these days is cooking, and just thinking about little things from, like, your low end can be whatever kind of, like, meat, potatoes, or bread, and, like, making sure that you're not, like, undercooking the bread or burning the bread, right? Making sure that there's that solid foundation. Your high end is more of like where your sauce ends up, or there's all those little things. But then there's also the reality that like when I'm cooking food, when I'm making food, the end result is always to make sure that I can consume it. It's not even necessarily to make sure it tastes good, right? It's just to make sure that like it is going to be edible and I'm going to eat it. And the more that I look at music that way and think like, okay, like I want to make sure that my soul or whatever can get something out of this process, the more free I feel to like, put mics in stupid places or whatever and taste as I go, this is too salty or this is too spicy, or like get a little weird with it and let my palate do some of the guiding, as opposed to like this is the right place to put mics or not. You know what I mean?
Very cool. Yeah, I think it's all about learning, right? And I think it sounds very funny to say, but you're not a music producer until you produce a record, right? And so you got to just ask somebody, hey, I could produce your record. You have to be confident to think, hey, I think I know I can do this. But of course, you tell the client, of course I can produce your record, because you have to learn, right? And if they're doing it for some friends, doing it for yourself, you can have all that fun learning and experimenting that, when you have a different type of clientele, you don't want to have that. You want to make sure everything's right. You don't make any mistakes. But sometimes happy mistakes are fun.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of getting like the right people who like are along for the ride to some extent, and the other big thing about the cooking metaphor is like I only really love the dishes I make when I eat them that I like loved making. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's the same thing with music. It's like I only really love the final thing when I can hear like, oh yeah, this you stretched and you had fun and you did, something different with this,
Yes, that's funny. I'm laughing only at my own thought, not yours,
Yeah,
because
you're good.
no matter how good is something I cook, I typically hate it because I cooked it. And whatever my wife makes, I prefer. And she's like, this is so much better than what I cook. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't have to cook it, and it just tastes so much better. But I didn't mean to be laughing at what you were saying.
I really relate to that. As much as I'm like, yeah, cooking and music and love what you eat, I'm the same. And anything my girlfriend makes, I'm like, this is incredible. And anything I make, not on like a mix, it's like, oh, this is good, but I'm always like tasting it and being like, oh, it needs more lemon, or next time needs more of this, needs more of that.
It's overcooked.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm gonna ask you one more question here, and then we can get into some one more tune.
Please.
When you are taking on a new production, how do you like to gauge for pricing? Do you have a day rate? Do you have a per song rate?
Yeah, what kind of splits do you do? Like 20%, 50%?
Yeah, the splits thing is something that I'm coming around on a little bit more. I think the deals that I've sort of worked out now is like people that I'm working with, I'm like $500 a day, and I say this is for me.
Whatever we get done.
Whatever
today.
we get done today. Yeah. And
what's a day look like for you? Sorry, hours.
No. Yeah. So it's, depends on the project, but a lot of the time, what I'm doing is like coming in with a client, maybe spending the first like hour just trying to like get in their head like what the song's supposed to be. They'll be playing a guitar or piano or something, and I'll be playing drums and sort of envisioning like, okay, here's where it'll go. And then at that point, I pretty much always do the drums first because it just doesn't feel fun to like track drums to guitar, get those going and then just kind of start layering, do the bass, do the, this and that. These days I can bang out like the rhythm section pretty well in like a day, coming up with the arrangement with a client and everything. We'll get in there anywhere from like 9 to 11, get out by like the evening.
So it's like a full like 8 hours or so?
Yeah, it's
8,
like
10 hours?
8 to 10 hours, depending on kind of how the juices are flowing,
Understandable.
And if somebody's like, I want to do 4 days in a row or whatever, like I'll bundle it up and like knock some of that off. And
sure.
Splits wise, these days I think I'm more like 10 to 20% depending on the project and depending on how much like reinvention happened, because something that I like thinking about how, like, I get this a lot with clients where they come in with a song and they're like, here's how it goes, and they're singing it, and it's like some of the stuff is just, they're going, ugh, and they go down to a low note and it disappears, or they go up to a high note and it disappears, and finding like, okay, wait, let's try this in a different key and let's see what that feels like. With the jazz background, I like a lot of reharmonization and stuff like that, and so that gets into like composition-y territory, and so just having a little bit of extra down the line to hopefully accumulate into some kind of a retirement plan.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we feel similarly to that, right? If you can have a piece of many pies, then hopefully it adds up to a whole one for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. We had a guy in last week, and he does a lot of sessions in writing in Nashville, and he said if you change a word, you get a third, right? That was kind of his perspective. And it seems like everybody kind of has a different approach to what songwriting or what it could be on the publishing end, right? And if any of you guys have read the book by Ari Herstand, How to Make It in the New Music Business, he gives a lot of really cool examples, and he says, maybe the guy who's typically drinking beer is sitting on the couch only contributes 5%, but what if that 5% makes the tune? Yeah. So it's hard to really gauge it. But I think for us, just understanding how everybody out there is choosing to do it, and I've used this example a couple times with the Black Keys, and I don't know if you've heard it or not from Patrick. He said, when they worked with Danger Mouse for the first time, they kind of screwed him over, and they didn't know really. But he said at the end, hey, you kind of screwed me, Danger Mouse said. I should have publishing on this. And they're like, well, we didn't know. It was only the two of us all this time. And the next time, from the start, they did a 3-way split, and there was, to kind of make things right. But, they were, I would say, relatively famous at that point, but they just didn't know how other people typically want to work. So we kind of similarly do what you do with the day rates and stuff too, because day rates can be a little easier to swallow than an hourly rate, because then you're kind of floating with minutes, and it's just kind of annoying. Yeah. Nobody wants to count minutes. We need breaks. We need dinners. Totally. We need a mental refresh sometimes. So it's cool that you're kind of similarly thinking that way. it could go long if it's going really well, right? You don't want to stop when you caught that dragon, right? You don't want to let her go. But if you're pulling teeth, then maybe it's time to call it a day, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big, on that last note, I'm a big proponent of the autobiography Haruki Murakami wrote like 20 years ago. What I talk about when I talk about running, he has a portion of that where he talks about how his writing process is one where he had a full day and he knows he's kind of nearing, I should think about dinner or whatever. When he gets that idea that's like, oh yeah, like feeling that second wind or whatever, that's when he stops and he writes it down and he walks away. Mm-hmm. And that's he does that so that the next time he comes to write, he's not like, what the hell am I, searching the ether.
I think Stephen King does that too.
Oh, does he?
But yeah, I've heard that from other people too, where it's a great tool. Like, stop when you know what the next thing is, so when you pick it up again, you have somewhere to start.
Yeah, and so that you're energized and you're like you're excited to do it, and you're not having to like fight the self-doubts and all that other stuff.
That's funny. I've heard a few opposites of that, right? I don't know. One I've heard in Neil Young's autobiography, he said whenever he had an idea, he would never put it down. He'd be at a dinner party, he'd be wherever, and if he had an idea, he's gone. And he's going and he's getting it, in his mind, he's getting it tracked, whether or not that's true, but it was in his book, so he wrote it. And then another one I keep seeing on all the shorts and reels lately is John Mayer saying that having a dinner reservation ruins your recording session. Because you're going to leave at 6 or 7, whatever, to go to dinner. But typically the best stuff happens when you have to leave. Yeah, right. So he's like, just skip the dinner and you're doing a great job. Just keep moving. Yeah. And you found that gold for the day and capitalize on it. The beauty here is you find what works for you, right? And that's the key that all of us are trying to find. How do you find that gold when you need it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks so much for that chat. Let's hear the next tune. right, cool. I love that. I keep saying that, and I mean it, but I'm jamming over here. I have a lot of questions now, and I'm trying to phrase them in an order that makes sense. So, all right, you wrote all these tunes, you played all the parts yourself, but when you get these guys in to go on the road on these tunes, are they playing the parts you wrote? Are they kind of writing what they like?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time they're making it better. 'Cause we got what was that?
So I don't know about that.
We got a real drummer and we got a real guitar player on it, so it's like
That's fair. I mean, these guys definitely know how to play. That's for sure. There was a lot of great tones on that one.
Oh, yeah.
I like how plinky it kind of got in that points, and then the distortion was great. Yeah, so you kind of allow the freedom, right? You say like, here's my songs, but take this part and expand upon it. But for example, there was that one song, the second song, where the groove completely changed, right? Did you write that, or did he bring that to the table?
That was a very late night discovery of mine that Sam then kind of elaborated on. A lot of the second song we played is a ways out from being released, but a lot of like one of the rules I have for the new record is making hard stuff sound easy. And so that second groove there's a 5/4 rhythm that I had kind of kicking around my head for a very long time, and I had a riff for like 7 years that I was like, man, it'd be cool to find some way to make this work. And then there was one night where I was playing around on the kit and realized that if you phrase it with do like a backbeat thing with the 4, then you start. It became cool and it became different and it became exciting, and it was. It hopefully didn't sound like homework, which was like a lot of my complaints with some of the like proggier stuff, is that it sounded like jazz school homework.
Oh, that's funny. That's super cool. Well, I think this is a great time for you to introduce these guys to us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, while we were talking about drums, we got Sam Subar over here on the drums, drummer extraordinaire, quietest, shreddingest 16th notes in Chicago. Hopefully the people watching at home can see some of his finger technique in particular, because it is insane.
Unless it's patent pending, we don't want to be we don't want to be giving away the secrets.
He teaches too, so just
very cool.
Get in there. And then to my right here, we've got Sam Genualdi.
Just curious, when you're on the road or you're going to want to book these tours, are you trying to find a way? How much money do you want to make a day? Are you trying to break even? Are you trying to pay for gas? Are you trying to pay for gas, hotel, food? Do you have like a rule of thumb, or you just prefer to just get out there and the plus or minus you figure out later?
It's a little bit of both. I'm like, it's very type A when it comes to some of the business stuff. I got spreadsheets on spreadsheets, and I've got like a very regular email grind that I'm hitting to like make sure people are getting back to me or getting back to me, whether it's a yes or a no. That's kind of my rule. Is like, I'm going to stop emailing you when you say no.
I think that's our take right there.
Yeah.
If you're out there and if you're an aspiring artist,
I've talked to enough bookers and promoters and stuff like that are like, man, we get so many emails a day that it's like not personal that we don't respond. Just like, I have yet to hear one say, I don't like getting all these emails, and it's also kind of part of the job, so I'm like, okay, that's what it is. And so typically the way it works is like I like to have some kind of like purposeful gig that we're doing. This run, we got this gig at the Alluvion last night, which is a great space with a nice built-in crowd and a nice guarantee, $500 guarantee for us. And then it's just a matter of seeing, okay, what else can we find along the way? We've all got jazz backgrounds, so it's like worst case scenario, we can play breweries and do Steely Dan and Dave Matthews covers for until the cows come home, and instrumental, or maybe Sam will sing the Dan or the Dave Matthews. But just trying to make, I really value these guys' time, so I always try to make sure that there's at least $100 going to each of them for each like show that we play, basically, and making sure that like with the guarantees the numbers add up, at least to make sure they're covered, and then fingers crossed that we can get some places to stay along the way, and if not, that's what my credit card's for.
Sure. Well, I think that's very pragmatic, honestly. I mean, it's like you have like your kind of tiers of goals, and it helps having 3 players total, because
it's a 5-piece in Chicago.
Less people.
So it was a 5-piece in Chicago,
and that makes sense. I mean, when you want to hit the road, you need to make sure you have all your bases covered, which you guys definitely do, but also another mouth to feed, another person to listen to. You know?
It scales. I mean, the over under on like a trio versus a 4-piece, it's like we are making it work with the three of us, drums, amps, and all in my Prius. And
That's impressive.
Yeah, and we just could not do that with a 4-piece without renting a trailer or getting a bigger van or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like
very cool.
And this is the same thing with production. Like I think the restraints can promote a lot of creativity, and like, you know, this might open up a bigger conversation. But the other piece of it for me too with this is that I just kind of want music to pay my bills. I don't really, I sort of not gave up, but like stopped caring as much, obsessing about like my music being the thing that pays my bills. Right. So the joke, the way I tell it to people is like, I'm a musician, I run a studio space, music pays my bills, but my music owes me a lot of money.
I mean, that's a good way to put it, right? Because I know, so you're also teaching, as you mentioned, so that's a big part of the income, and you're also a contractor for Reverb, which I found out, which I think is really interesting. You know, when you reached out to us in a very, very nice email, by the way, I know I pointed that out. It was to the point. The links worked.
Yes.
You know, that's a huge thing. But also, I'm like, man, this guy looks really familiar. And then the next day, he shared a story. It was a Reverb pedal video for bass. And I'm like, no wonder I've seen this guy. You know, and I was nerding out, right? I've been trying to wait to find out where this nerd question would come in, but since you brought it up, here it is. I've seen a lot of guys and girls who work for Reverb, and I'm always curious what that looks like. And you mentioned Joe. I feel like I know Joe, even though I don't, right? I've watched so many of Joe's videos. I've been to Chicago Music Exchange a lot, and I feel like I know a lot of these people. Some of those guys who've been there forever, who like they started that like those trendy things that have become synonymous with that shop and with Reverb. And I don't know their affiliation, and not that I need to know, but it's just so interesting to me. So you mentioned, you know, there is a house team in Reverb who's like kind of creating content. And then there's also you and Joe and other people who are contractors. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's like, basically we're the talent.
Sure.
So it's like they've usually got a sense of like, this is kind of the things we want to shoot, or this feels cool. And right now, my understanding of it is that the content team, the people kind of behind the cameras, they can kind of call the shots, you know? And so they're just, that gig is like, I'll do my homework to make sure that I like know the gear or whatever that I'm talking about. And then I just show up and try not to waste too much of their time. You know, try not to get too lost in the 15 takes and this compressor, that distortion, you know, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's cool that, you know, they seem to have like an idea, but then allow you to provide your input and kind of bounce these ideas off you as the artist and as the player, right? It's not so much that they have this firm idea, but...
Are you doing any of the production, or is the team there doing the production?
I am literally just the on-camera talent.
Oh, that's awesome. And then how long does a shoot take for a 3-minute video or a 5-minute video? I don't know how long the lengths are that you typically do.
It depends. I mean, like maybe an hour. The last video that I did for them was, I think it ended up being like 25 minutes. It was a good like 2 or 3 hours of kind of rambling and you know, figuring out how we wanted to get the point across. But yeah, a typical shoot.
So do you like brainstorm before you start?
Yeah, I mean, there's like some shared docs and some kind of emails back and forth with John Gagan's the guy kind of running the content team right now, and he's been a friend of mine since I started there, and me and him kind of like.
So you come up with like an idea.
Yeah, we come up with like a game plan too, you know.
And you have an idea what you're going to say, and then you go in and you kind of just perform it?
So the last one we did was like 5 essential bass effects, right? And so just figuring out like, okay, between the bass pedals they have and the bass pedals I have, what is important, and then kind of parsing that out. You know, you've got like crunchy sounds, right? Distortion, fuzz, overdrive. We didn't even get to Bit Crusher in the video, which is my personal favorite distortion.
So you brought your own personal pedals, and then they had some too that you were using.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the compressors they had like the fancy, way too much knobs and shit compressors, and I had my little exotic that's just basically an always on.
Yeah, sometimes compression pedals can be, you know, there's too many knobs, they can get a little confusing, right? You don't necessarily need all that for a pedal. I don't know. But I don't want to squash the pedal brands here, because tweakability is nice, but you get to a certain threshold where you don't need more.
Well, yeah, so back to those videos. If you wanted to do more videos with Reverb, could you reach out and be like, hey, I'd love to do 2 more this month? What's the working relationship like?
Sort of. Kind of the working relationship these days is like they actually just hit me up on this tour to do a synth thing. I don't exactly know what it's going to be, but when we get back,
Cool.
And yeah, kind of the way it works is so the Reverb content team now is in the studio space that I rent. The building has like 5 studios in there, and so they are in Narwhal Studios A room for 2 days out of the week, which is on the 3rd floor of the building that my studio's in. So it's like very easy when we're scheming on a shoot to just like jump up there and kind of walk, say, hey, what are we doing?
Yeah, just showing up in the space. Sometimes you end up on a record.
Yeah,
There's so many stories of that.
No, exactly, and it's. I mean, the nature of that gig has changed a lot over the years. I think like so many people who are like on the YouTube grind, for lack of a better way to put it, there's things that do work better for the algorithm. It was like when I first was doing that gig, I was really wanted to do a lot more like lesson style videos, and a lot of my early stuff was like kind of teaching bass lines from players, and that was fun. But what I really wanted to do was like how I teach private lessons, which is like using a Paul McCartney bass line as a way of like getting at an underlying concept and then like designing an exercise around that. And there was a while where they were letting me get away with that, but then it was very clear that the numbers was more like clickbait oriented and whatnot. And
I watched that Paul McCartney baseline thing, so thank you for that. Because it took me a little while to realize, like, man, which video? And then by the time we had our phone call, it's how to play in the style of Paul McCartney or how to play certain Paul McCartney lines,
like
regardless.
5 or 6 lines.
Yeah, but it was beautiful and it was really well done. So thank you for that. And I admit I have not watched a lot of bass videos. That was one of the few. So at least it was that one, but because it's super informative. Tell me a better, more influential bass player, maybe besides like Jamerson than McCartney, right?
For me?
Just in general, right? Like who has like such a unique bass style?
I mean, there's...
Maybe I didn't mean to open up a can of worms,
no,
but
like,
sure,
well,
please
like
answer.
Really, the first video I got to do in this way for them was kind of answers this. Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead was one of like, I mean, everybody in that band has taught me like the most about how I think about music, I think. But his specific approach to bass lines and his, we kind of did it in the second song we were playing here. But like, I remember the first time I saw Radiohead, I was just so blown away at how Johnny would, I'm sorry, I keep saying Johnny Greenwood, Colin Greenwood. Johnny Greenwood.
I was wondering, Johnny's probably got a bass
Johnny's
too.
the guitar player is his brother. Colin Greenwood. Colin would lay out for like half of the set sometimes. He wouldn't even be in for the first like 2 minutes of a song. And then when he'd come in, it was just like, woof, like you really feel like the presence and the like the bass just hits so much harder when it wasn't there the whole song. And he wouldn't even be coming in like, with any of that stuff. It would just be like a, something like that. But that little extra lift, halfway through was game changing for me.
Very cool. I also don't need a springboard to talk about Radiohead, so I'm going to try to do my best. But I mean, Nick, you said they're all such phenomenal musicians, knowing when to come in, when to stay out, when to just add nuances. And I think Tom York is a phenomenal bass player. I mean, that the couple Smile albums now, but I saw the Smile when they came through on that tour. And him playing bass and singing, I mean, it's just phenomenal. Yep. So it's super cool. So thanks so much, for telling us that stuff. That's really interesting. And I think it's cool that, you have that collaborative effort with Reverb and you guys are able to make those types of videos. So really well done. I think that's great stuff.
Thank you, man.
If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about this bass, actually.
I would love to tell. Well, I'm going to tell you like a tiny bit about this bass, and then I'm going to let the person who made it tell you even more. So this is a bass that I am kind of in the middle of buying from this gentleman to my right, Sam Genualdi in the band. One of the cool things, for as much as I might be sounding like a jack of all trades person or whatever, Sam works for a classical radio station doing mixing and engineering, and also for Third Coast Repairs, which is one of the biggest like guitar repair shops in the Midwest. He used to work for Deltronics. I mean, Sam is like you want like music help wizard. You know? Sam can fix your pre's and your guitar and cook you some great lunch
and play better than you
and play some sick solos.
Well, cool, Sam.
But Sam built this bass, so I'll let him say a little bit more about it.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, as Jake said, one of my day jobs in addition to performing and recording and producing music is working as an instrument repair technician. And yeah, in learning how to do that, I always kind of had this hunger to build something of my own. And this bass in particular is loosely based on the Vox Clubman, which was a 60s English-made sort of short scale, 30-inch scale electric bass. And I got to play one for the first time, and I was like, this is the cutest, most fun to play little thing. But it had some idiosyncrasies, some parts about it that just, the workmanship wasn't quite as good. And so I decided I wanted to build one. And this, it kind of turned out that it has like all of the specs that Jake would love to have in a bass. So I brought it to rehearsal one day, and he's like, so how much do you want for this thing?
I mean, to a T, like this is spec'd out. I'm a big short scale guy. I'm a big, just like light basses, very simple 2 pickup options. Like it was spooky.
Yeah. So to get into some specifics, we were talking, I think maybe a little bit before the shoot started, that this bass has a really present mid-range that speaks, and that actually comes from the pickups on this bass are Firebird pickups, like guitar pickups, and the pickup doesn't know if it's a guitar or a bass. Like there's no rule that says you have to have this or that. And I got them first just because of the aesthetic match to what was on the original Clubman. Always thinking I might end up having to ditch these and put a P pickup on it or something. But I was super pleasantly surprised with how they sound. And I got them cheap on eBay for like $80 for the pair. So.
Oh, so not on Reverb though.
Not on Reverb for these. I do of course shop a lot on Reverb, but
sorry, I'm just kidding. That's cool. So they're Firebird pickups.
Yeah.
Interesting. That bass sounds excellent.
Thank you.
Love the mid-range on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it has enough low end, of course, but the mid-range
sure.
is really a nice character.
Yeah, and the Firebird pickups work because they're a blade design underneath the cover, like the Hot Rails or something like that. There's not like 6 individual pull pieces in there, so it's really able to pick up all the strings.
Very cool. So did you cut the bodies and the necks and everything yourself?
Yeah, every single wooden component, and of course the bone nut as well, I shaped and finished myself. The pick guard I also made myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sam built the car we're touring in.
Wow, you work for Toyota?
I wish, man. I'd probably be making a little more money.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself, Sam, if you don't mind.
Sure. So in addition to playing in Maiden King with Jake, I also do a lot of hired guitar work in Chicago. I play with a various smattering of other bands that hit me up. And I also do a lot of production work. I just recently produced an EP for a band called Wide Mouth. They're some local younger musicians in Chicago who I think are really great, and I'm very proud of the music we made together. And my day job, I'm about half of my week is at Third Coast fixing guitars, and then as Jake mentioned, the other half I'm a recording and mixing engineer for a classical radio station in Chicago called WFMT. And so I'm on a daily basis recording and mixing world-class classical music from musicians from Chicago and beyond.
Is it soloists, or do you have groups, ensembles that come in?
All of the above, yeah. So, like in recent memory, I've done, lots of like violin and piano duos, lots of string quartets, brass quintet. Coming up, I'm going to be doing a recording for the violinist Rachel Barton Pine, and she actually, in addition to being a world-renowned soloist in classical violin, she's also really into heavy metal violin. So we're going to do a special, featuring that side of her musicianship. It should be fun.
So for the radio station, is it are you a contract worker, or like how does it work if you said it's part-time, right, or part of your time? So do they say, hey, we have a couple songs this week, or it just kind of depends on if you're available?
Yeah, so one of the programs I work on is it's kind of like this, it's every Monday night at 8 we're live on the air with a different ensemble. So I'm working engineering on that broadcast and engineering the multi-track recording for that.
Okay.
And then the other sessions are a little bit more haphazard, but it all amounts to about 20 or 24 hours a week. And I'm employed by them. I'm not a freelance engineer that comes in.
That's nice, actually, I would say, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're able to, you've based your schedule around, or they've based your schedule around yours, and you kind of know what you always have to be there Monday, and et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. And there's another engineer who's full-time there. And so between the two of us, we kind of end up, picking up every session that gets recorded, whether, if it's happening on a Saturday and he's not available, or however it kind of works out. We kind of switch taking the lead on different stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, I have another question.
Sure. Yeah.
So when you're, this is just like a gear nerd question, being curious about classical music versus pop, what I do. How many mics do you use on a piano, and what kind of mics? And same thing with violin.
Sure.
Are you using ribbon mics, or are you using small diaphragm condensers? And
yeah. So if it's solo piano, I'll go more expansive because I'm not as concerned about how that instrument is going to impact the sound of another instrument within the context of the whole mix. So if it's a solo piano, I'm usually going with a 5 microphone setup. So there's a pair of small diaphragm condensers in the front capturing a stereo image of the piano. And we're
where?
So with the lid open on a grand piano, just like, maybe 8 inches out from the body of the instrument. And
like a hammers?
Not aiming at the hammers, more aiming at like the center of the span of the strings.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually a little confusing. Like you'll have what you see as the microphone on the right is actually going to be panned left because it's capturing the lower end of the instrument, and you want like player's perspective. So the bass notes are on the left and the high notes go to the right. So I've got that as like kind of a main pair, and then I'll throw a ribbon mic at the far end of the piano, and that's going to capture a lot of the beef and bottom and just make the thing sound full. That'll be pan center and just like sneak it in until it starts to feel amazing. Never really want that to dominate. And then I'll have a room pair. Typically we're using a Royer SF12 in the room, so that's a stereo ribbon mic, Bloom line, and that's it's not too far back. It's still a full sound of the instrument itself, but it's also, because of the nature of the figure 8 pickup pattern, it's capturing a lot of the room from behind, the first reflections. And we have a beautiful Steinway D in the studio at WFMT and a fairly large live room, so you can get a very almost hall-like feel on a session like that.
That's what we have here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you would do it differently if there was a violinist or someone, because you wouldn't be able to do the rooms?
Yeah, it's because it's kind of like what we were talking about. Like, you could throw everything in the kitchen sink into the studio and then parse through it later. But if we're doing a broadcast, it's like you got to get the sound, and that's what it is. So I wouldn't set up, in particular, like the ribbon mic at the bottom, because I know I'm not going to need it when the piano is in an accompaniment role, right? Like, I don't want the piano to take up all that space because it's going to just feel imbalanced in the context of the ensemble. And additionally, in classical music, you never really want a mic that close. You want to have that natural sound. And so then we're getting into the issue of like, how does the piano sound in the violin microphone? Because when we bring up the violin in the mix, it's going to alter the color of the piano in the overall mix. And so that's a really important balance to be considering.
And the phasing and the pre-delay because of that.
And so that's why we end up often using either like ribbon mics, which have a really, really excellent null at 90 degrees. So if you really need to cancel something, it's going to be effective in that case. Or a microphone that has a really neutral off-axis response. So our like bread and butter small diaphragm mic is the Sheps, and we use the MK21 capsule, which is a wide cardioid. And it just feels really flat. Like the bleed of the piano into the violin mic still sounds like that piano, not like a piano that is doing this, you know?
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love the idea of using the null from the figure 8 polar pattern.
For sure.
That's a great tip. But yeah, sorry, I'll stop bugging you about microphones.
No,
but
this is
I
totally
just
fine.
nerd out on
Happy
that
to
stuff, and
nerd
I
out.
love learning how other genres of music use the microphones.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've done a similar setup too. It's a little different. We'll do two hammer mics, small diaphragms as well. Sometimes, kind of lately, we've been putting like a U87 kind of at the mouth of the piano at the end.
Yep.
And then we'll use 2 ribbon mics, but like a spaced pair of ribbon mics.
Sure.
Instead, we don't have a Bloom line. So, we recently borrowed one that was one of the AEA ones that was a Bloom line, which was
The R88.
yeah,
maybe?
exactly. And it was really cool, but it's nice to set one thing up and not have to sit there with 2 mics and
Yeah.
do the whole thing.
Right.
So typically, it's like we'll use 2 ribbon mics and space them out in here.
I love a space pair, and I think in general, like, it's good as an engineer or as an aspiring engineer to learn, like, what does Bloom line mean? Like, how do you set that up? But in reality and in practice, like, ORTF doesn't have to be this exact number of degrees and the exact number of 14 centimeters from, capsule to capsule to mimic the human ear distance. It's like...
Well, yeah, like Glenn Johns, he says,
Exactly.
like, I never actually measured it.
Right, it's
eyeballed it.
at the end of the day, it's what sounds good. And I have the benefit in the terms of that piano in that room. Like, I know it really well. I know what's going to sound good. And I just like go to my setup that I have found through trial and error. But I would encourage anyone who has a couple microphones, just like try different stuff. Yeah, do a space pair, do it a foot apart, do it 5 feet apart, put a mic in the kitchen. Like, you never know what's going to feel right for the song.
Totally. I think never really measuring, but just using our ears and using the context of the mix and using the desired goal of what we want the mix to be.
Totally.
Like you said, like we do a lot of drum sessions for people. They come in and we'll put room mics all around, like over there, and over there. And it's because it's like, how much reverb do you want? And they're like, well, we don't know. Like, all right, here, we'll give you 3 different room sounds or 4 different room sounds.
Yeah.
Let your mixing engineer, you guys can decide later. But it allows us that fun, especially if we're not mixing it. If we were mixing it, we would make the decision, right? But if
Totally.
it's a client piece, it is fun to experiment. It gives us that opportunity. I know we had one time a session where we had like a 414 on a short stand just sitting around, and we put it underneath the piano,
Cool.
just facing up, like, and it just added this really interesting kind of murky low end, and it was fun. I don't know how much made it in the mix. John might remember, but at least listening to it was fun, right?
None of it,
fun.
maybe?
This was a while ago, so it's
Sure.
like one of those things. But it's like, just because the mic's on a stand here, maybe did an acoustic guitar or something. It's
Sure.
like, let's just stick it under there. It's on.
Yeah, why not?
So, it's fun to have that experimentation, because kind of what we were saying before, you experiment, okay, that actually sounded like crap, or that was cool. Let's use it next time we want a unique sound for this. But, obviously I'm assuming with a production, you want to make sure it's like great right away, and you've done it, and you want to replicate that.
Totally.
You don't want any room for error, right?
Yeah, I think in classical music in particular, like, we're often trying to, as closely as we possibly can, get it to sound like the person who's sitting in the best seat in the house. Like, what's their experience like? If I'm just sitting in front of that piano, how does it sound? Because microphones don't listen the same way that our ears do, and the way that our brain decodes what information is coming in. And so it's, it's a process of going into the room and sitting there and listening, moving around, and then going back into the control room and figuring out, like, okay, how can I better represent how this actually sounded in the room? But where it gets fun, if you're working on, a pop session or a rock session or something, here it's like, and to some degree in classical music, it can get at this, but it's like your imagination is the limit, like, we're not trying to, make it be an honest capture anymore necessarily, which is cool.
That is cool. I think it's fun, there's rules and then there's also like what you want, right? And not to plug our own thing, but we did a fun shootout for our own YouTube channel a few weeks ago, and it was what's the best mic for a guitar amp?
Cool.
And what ended up being our favorite was a C451 small diaphragm condenser.
I love those.
And it's like, people are like, I have an older engineer friend. He's like, that's not for a guitar amp. I'm like, hey, guess what? We loved it. And we've never used it on a guitar amp because it's not supposed to be.
Totally.
We use John loves a 414 on a guitar amp or a 214. I have plenty of people who I know that will be like, that's not a guitar mic. That's a whatever mic. I'm like, guess what? It sounds great.
Yeah, and so does, a Royer and a 57.
Yeah.
Like, that's the bread and butter for a lot of folks. Just a 57 or, 441 or whatever. Those are all great choices. But I love that perspective. Just like, you can try whatever you've got. And, mess with the placement. Try to find, something that gets you excited.
Definitely. Well, that's super cool. Go ahead, John.
What's the biggest group that you've gotten in there?
Man, last year I want to say it was, we did Uniting Voices Chicago, which formerly was known as the Chicago Children's Choir. And it's a massive, obviously, vocal group. So it's like, I think it was maybe 60 singers. But then they're accompanied by a band of bass, drums, acoustic piano, a Roland synthesizer, and guitar. And so we had all of them in the room together.
You have a room big enough for that many people?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
So how many mics did you use on the choir?
For the choir?
Yeah, was it like every 10 people there was another mic, or?
Yeah, like 60 lapel bikes. No, it was so we had a main pair. I think we used the Sheps in like an XY as a main pair, and then we had KSM 44s, I think 5 or 6 of them, capturing maybe about 10 voices each. And then there was also a solo mic that soloists could step up to, so that we would have control in those moments, just to be able to give that voice some extra juice.
Cool. So that's when you have presumably good players, good musicians who know their dynamics really well.
Totally. I mean, and to be frank, like in that room, drums sound nuts. Like, it's not supposed to be a dry, controlled sound, because for most classical applications, you want a little bit more back from the room. But the second there's a kick drum in there, it's like, whoa, man.
It's like
so
super
do you try to baffle it and block it off as much as you can with gobos, or?
I think what happened with that session was because that drum set was backlined and it was a jazz kit, and what we needed was more of a rock kick drum that is tighter and not so much ring. But we did, we threw some panels in front of the kick drum and got the drums as far away from the vocal ensemble as we possibly could, with them still being able to do what they needed to do.
Yeah, that's quite a challenge. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. It reminds me of something I read about when you have a French horn, you can put a hard panel behind them and you mic it this in front because it bounces off. So
because their bell is pointing back.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting if you listen to a brass quintet recording. I find oftentimes the French horn specifically will sound 10 times roomier than every other member of the ensemble for that reason, because it's often mic'd from the front. But again, in classical music, you're oftentimes trying to replicate the experience of an audience member, and that's actually how the French horn sounds. If you're sitting there, it is bouncing off the back wall before it comes to you. You're hearing the first reflection, and so if you want the recording to be honest, that's the sound that you're going to get.
I'm curious, when I've never been in an ensemble that large, but if you're standing in that group, are these people hearing anything, or they're just getting blasted by everybody else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember stepping into the room and just being astonished at how amazing it sounded in there. When they really all got going and every voice was opened up and because I mean, 60 voices can easily compete with a rock band.
Yeah, it can hang with a drum set.
Yeah.
So it sounded amazing in the room, and I think that there's also a conductor that's gluing the ensemble together. So it wasn't absolutely essential that every member of the band needed to hear, each other or each instrument, because we're not running headphone system for that kind of session. Like, it's what's happening in the room is what's happening in the room.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to the symphony tomorrow, so I have all these like
nice.
thoughts in my head because I go quite a bit. But I have to imagine, if you're in the middle of that room, when you're this far from a trumpet, it's just blasting you.
Yeah.
Right. I can only imagine. I always think about the other people. They put the violas in the center, and then there's the brass right there. Like they're just getting blasted by brass. I mean, not that I don't have a lot of experience recording or being around them, but just knowing they're very loud.
Yeah, absolutely. I recorded an orchestra festival last summer in Wisconsin called the Peninsula Festival, and they had like acrylic panels on, like basically mounted on music stands, to shield like the viola section from the horns.
Cool.
So yeah, there's definitely some of that going on.
Yeah, that's really cool. So we actually have a lot of students that we work with, interns. So William is an intern, Chris upstairs is an intern. Cool. We have another intern here as well who's not here today. But did you go to music school? And if you did, did you go for recording? Can you elaborate on any of that stuff?
Sure, yeah. I went to Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. I went initially as a guitar performance major, and I ended up pivoting a little bit. I still have a Bachelor of Music degree, but it ended up being in what I called contemporary improvisation, which was just a way for me to get a little bit more of a holistic view of music. I didn't want to just be a guitar player. So I did do a lot of recording, and I played in a lot of ensembles doing different global traditions like Brazilian samba and Balinese gamelan and things like that. So just trying to get a little bit more zoomed out and a better picture of music education that can be more expansive.
Excellent.
How'd you get the job at the studio? Did you apply with the resume, or did you know someone?
That one, the operations manager there, his name is Gene Nemrovsky, and he's a really great recording engineer and did a lot of live sound in Chicago. And we had met just, it's like music scenes everywhere. They're small. And so I had ended up doing some subbing for him, doing like A1 live sound stuff. And then he called me directly and said, we have an open position, and I think you should apply.
Really cool. Yeah, I was about to ask the same question because I'm curious. It sounds like a gig they would want. Maybe they'd want somebody with like a recording background or recording degree, and I'm curious as like how specific they are with that, if not, if you just know what you're doing.
I mean, I think he, me having like subbed for him before, he knew what I like, my background and what skills I had. I think he was also interested in someone who had some troubleshooting abilities in terms of like working with equipment, which I had, having done like professional audio equipment repair for a few years. And even though I'm not there like with a soldering iron, but just like being able to think in that way. And like before this session, just like, I'm not getting kick drum, like what's going on? And if you're not thinking about it in a methodical way, like you might waste a lot of time trying to figure that out. But it's like, okay, there's like a cable coming from the mic and it's going to the snake and then it's going to the preamp. And like, you got to think in this kind of like top down approach.
Yeah, for sure. You have to be organized with your thought. You can't just you can't change too many things at once.
Exactly.
Right? You need to make sure you're only going one at a time, or else it can be a problem for sure. And that, that's very cool. I appreciate all that.
Sure.
If you don't mind, unless you have anything else, we can talk to
Yeah, please.
Sam drummer over here too, just to give this guy some love. He's been playing so well.
Thank you.
At least, so yeah, tell us your name. Tell us about yourself too.
My name is Sam Subar. I am from Chicago. I also studied music in school. I went to Berklee in Boston. I perform and teach all around the Chicago area. So my bread and butter during the day is I drive. I have like a private teaching business.
Cool.
And I'll drive to folks' homes and do lessons at home in both drums and piano. And then, I just perform in a whole bunch of different groups. I will record on sessions for people, tour. Jake and I actually met at one of the first sessions I did in Chicago.
That's right, Renee.
Yeah.
Reno Cruise.
Yes. And yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. So teaching drums in somebody's home, how do they do that? They have a kit set up or it just
Yeah, I mean,
just
they have to
depends?
have a kit set up. And yeah, it's usually just switching off. I mean, I'll bring a drum pad. So if we're doing like hand technique stuff, I can sit there with my pad and they have the pad or their snare drum. But then as far as like the full kit goes, it's me sitting behind the kit and showing them something and then seeing how they can fare with it.
Cool. Yeah. So if somebody says, I want to learn the Bonzo triplets, you're like, okay, we got 3 drum pads here.
No, they have their drum set. We make it work.
Very cool. I appreciate it. Because it seems so funny to me. Like I'm so naive to the point, like being in a big city, how do you play and where do you play? Right? Because growing up in this area in Midwest, Metro Detroit, it's like having a home at my parents. I could just go to town. It was really my brother, the one that was, like, hey, stop. And my parents like, you be quiet, right? He's doing his thing, right?
You can get lucky in Chicago. Right now, I'm actually living in what's called a coach house. I don't know if they have those in Detroit, really.
I'm not sure what that is.
From my understanding, it's pretty unique to Chicago. Basically, it's a standalone home that sits behind like a multi-unit townhome that I don't know why they're so common in Chicago. I think they were maybe originally built for like landlords to live in,
Okay.
maybe own the building in front of them or something. But now they just rent them out like other units.
Sure.
So I live in a coach house with like 3 other people who are luckily totally cool with me playing drums.
Nice.
And so I literally just have a drum set up in my room that I can play basically anytime.
Is it all mic'd up and ready to go?
Sometimes I should say. Sometimes it depends. I do a little bit of tracking as well.
That's the biggest holdup for us. If it's not plugged in and ready to go, then it's like I don't even want to get started.
Yeah. Usually not. My room is pretty small, but I make it work.
Cool.
Yeah.
Get the 2 mic thing going and just like let her rip.
Yeah. No, I have a pair of Cascade Vinjet ribbon mics, which I love. And then other than that, I just have like a kick mic, snare mic.
That's really all you need.
4 mic setup for the drums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember when I first got a 2-channel interface, miking drums with 2 channels, and then I got an 8-channel, and I did like 2, then 3, then 4, and it's like, seeing how you can kind of start to flavor it differently by adding more, because you don't always need them, but like knowing what each additional one can add, and it's kind of a fun experiment that I just did de facto because I had a 2-channel first.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, with drums specifically, so much to do with just like what room are you recording in? How good? Well, yeah.
I think that goes to say with a lot of the instruments, right?
And with drums in particular.
Oh yeah, the acoustic ones for sure.
Yeah.
You gotta have that touch.
Yeah. I do feel lucky. I had a really life-changing instructor at Berklee who like his whole thing was like drum tone. So it was like really honing in on like, where are you hitting the drum? Are you being intentional with it? And yeah,
you sound great. I mean,
thank you.
Your tone and like you just sat down when you got here and did like a kick pattern, floor tom pattern. I'm like, dude, this is gonna be awesome.
Thank you.
I think.
What was that instructor's name?
His name was Bob Galati. He's passed away now, but he was actually mainly like a free jazz drummer.
Wow. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So no time signature ever. He's just going to time.
Pure tone.
Yeah. Pure tone. Yeah.
That's super cool. I think, one thing I love here is we use the same drum kit for 99% of our sessions. We got the same room, relatively same mic setup, but it always sounds unique to that player. And that's one of my favorite things to set up. We have our things that work for us, and it's cool to see and hear how different it sounds just with it's that person's touch. It's so much that.
100%,
Same with the
yeah.
acoustic piano.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I have like many guitar amps and pedal, you know, guitars and stuff, and everybody sounds different on those things.
Mm-hmm.
I did a session where I used all my own gear for a guitar tone. It sounded great in my hands. I handed it to the guy, and it sounded terrible. And I'm looking at him. I'm thinking, what? And it was just the way he did or didn't mute.
Yeah.
I picked pretty hard, so he picked pretty soft. It's like, it was so amazing how awful that tone was. And I would have been like, this tone sucks, but it's mine, so I can't trash it.
Right.
But of course, it's like those experiences that teach you like how those nuances are so important.
Definitely.
And that's what we all are bringing to the table here, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that, you know, like I said, this kit for us in this room.
Yeah, this kit sounds great.
You know, we got it from a collector who
Okay.
you know, at least took really good care of it and
Yeah.
you know, polished it and all the whole jazz. But I wanted to touch a little bit on this just idea that maybe I have that I don't know if it's true or not, but you know, Chicago is a big city. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of musicians. Do you find that the music scene there is inclusive? Do you find that there are plentiful gigs? Do people have, you know, territorial artists, like as a producer? Or is it like, oh, I'm busy that Friday. You give this gig to your friend because he'll throw you a gig next week. I've heard that about New York, right? There's plentiful gigs, so there isn't this kind of like gatekeeping. Can you elaborate a little bit on Chicago? Is it similar? Like, where does it fall?
I feel like it's starting to change. When I moved to Chicago, it felt very gatekeepy. It felt like there was like very specific genres of music that were like, this is allowed. This is like
What do you mean allowed?
Like people are gonna you're gonna get the golden thumbs up, as we call it, and you're gonna be able to you'll get the cool gigs, and you'll get, you know, all the cool opening opportunities. And it was a lot of like neo soul bands, psych rock bands, and then like kind of folky country bands. And it was like everything else sort of outside of that was like, or God forbid something was like not as pin downable. It was a lot harder to like break in, you know, because there was a I don't want to quite say as bad as like LA, but like a cool factor or something like that, you know, that was I think for me a big part of like why I felt insecure for a long time about putting a project like this together. You know, last night when we played at the Alluvion, we did like a 90-minute set where we did a lot of the first record, which was like much more kind of Americana type stuff, and then we came in with our, you know, 5/4 hard tuning Bon Iver bullshit for the next stuff, and it's I like stuff that is like diverse and versatile like that, but I feel like the scene has started to evolve more, and people are like becoming a lot more open to like different genres and different styles, and there's starting to be this like awareness of like we shouldn't think about it like I've got to get mine, but more like we've got to help each other, or, you know.
Which I think is really cool.
I think Sam's got some stuff to say.
No, yeah, I was gonna say I feel like even since I've moved there in the last 5 years, I feel like I've sensed some of that happening too. I feel I've been a part of this group. Doesn't have a name yet, just of independent Chicago musicians who are just basically trying to figure out how we can better ourselves and the scene we're a part of. And something I think we've talked about in Chicago in particular is the institutionalized segregation that has been a part of Chicago. It being like one of the most segregated cities per capita in the world, and how that plays into things. And something we've talked about a lot is like, because it's like you have, I don't know, there's like different pockets of scenes. A lot of the venues are sadly like just very north side centric, but then you have like communities of people on the south side of Chicago, and they're doing their own thing. Communities on the north side, west side, east side. So something we're talking about is like, how do you bridge that gap and keep something that feels like it's cross-pop.
Well, yeah, you want to bring people together with music.
Exactly.
You don't want the separation. That's really odd too, because we don't have that as much in Detroit.
You don't have the like segregation, the separation.
Yeah, the separation is as much where you have like Cliff Bell's in Detroit, where it's everyone plays there. It's jazz, and everyone's welcome. And same thing with places like Motor City Wine. I hope that there's more stuff like that popping up in Chicago.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I know there's a lot of violence too there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's at this point in Chicago, it's not even a matter of like, oh, like we're intentionally not having these people play at this club because they're from this part of the city or they play this style. It's just kind of like culturally has kind of just like seeped its way into how the city operates more so. And so, but there's never, I feel like now people are kind of really thinking more about like, okay, how do we actively push against that when you have a literal highway that stretches through the city that like separates certain communities from each other, where it's like, I'm obviously not going to bump into that person necessarily at a gig if they live in the south side of Chicago and they're, going playing these clubs, and how do we make sure that people keep cross-pollinating from around the city, and that's more of a reality. Yeah,
that's a great point.
So again, being naive to it, are there enough venues? Are there, like, if I wanted to go play, once a week, is it pretty easy to find a way in, or do you have to, good venues? I'm sure. I'm saying anywhere. Like, I've been to Chicago plenty of times living here, but it just seems like there's all these different restaurants and bars that have an opportunity to play, or is that just from an outside perspective?
Kind of depends on the time of year. Like, like summer, there's a lot more stuff going on. There's, the pandemic changed a lot of things for so many places. It was like, compassion's the wrong word, but I have room in my heart for what it takes to like run a venue, and the money you've got to be able to bring in, and like how that affects how you look at like booking acts, this person's there, they always sell out versus, taking a chance on like a younger artist.
But you want them to make money. You don't really want to make money on their loss. And
that's
like,
that's one of the things that,
well, it's almost like your responsibility as an artist sometimes to bring in your audience. So that way you all make money, but then there's a balance to that too. Because if you're always bringing in stuff and the other acts aren't, or the venue isn't even promoting it, then why would you want to even play at that venue when you can just put together your own show?
Yeah, and I think some of the questions that I think this organization community thing that Sam's a part of, I'm on their. I don't want to say I'm a part of it. I'm on their mailing list. I haven't been able to make it to one of the meetings yet, but I'm very much.
I don't think. Yeah, I feel like it's a very open. It's an open book. Right?
Yeah,
you're getting there. You're close.
We're getting there. My schedule will align one of these days, but I think it's just about being able to move beyond even this sense of like, oh, you've got to do your part to like bring people to stuff or whatever, and just making sure that like the people around you have enough to like get by, I think that's the only like lingering frustration that I think I have sometimes with Chicago is, I think the case of it's true for New York, it's true for LA, it's true for so many different scenes that like the musicians who tend to be doing the best and tend to be selling places out, there is a correlation with like some kind of generational wealth, or some kind of like, these are people who can afford to take these risks and to take like a bigger, like, I don't know, I'm going to go out on a really long tour, or I'm going to spend a shit ton of money in like promotion for this show just to like see if I can get people here, just to get the venues to like know that I'm serious. It's a lot harder when you don't have those resources, or don't have, I don't even want to say the resources, don't have like, I can't like call my parents up and be like, hey guys, I can't afford this hotel we got to stay in tonight. It's like, that's going on my credit card.
That's such an interesting point, because a lot of musicians, you have to make it in like the pop world by the time you're like 25. And if you look at someone like Willow Smith, I don't know if you know her new stuff, it's incredible. But the only reason she could get that incredible is taking personal voice lessons with someone for years and years, and all of the things that she was able to do because she has money and she has her parents that can find her the best person ever. Right, I know.
We
exactly.
were having a super, like, a very parallel conversation, exactly what you just said yesterday. I don't think we were talking about Willow Smith, but someone similar. It's like, oh yeah, like this person was afforded every chance, and the support that comes from like anytime they had an idea, everyone was like, cool, like well, we're going to give you everything you need to like feed this idea.
Right.
And if you're like, well, I, gotta bust ass 50 hours a week just to, make rent and feed my kid or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like,
and then pay for your own record.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
pay for your own record
And have the creative energy to like make a record.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that point of like nurturing too is really key, because it can I feel very encouraged by my folks at this point, but I know there were a couple periods where it was they just wanted to know I was going to be okay. And so like the first time I worked at like a mortgage company for a couple of years in Chicago when I first moved in. The first time I told them I was quitting to, make fucking $20,000 a year as a working musician, they were like, but hold on, do you have to do that? Versus my friends who had a much more affluent background, it was like, yeah, of course you've got like, we full support whatever you need, and, yeah, I don't say all this to poo-poo it too much, maybe a little bit, but just to like acknowledge it. I think that's the big thing, because one of the most frustrating things when I moved to Chicago was that the most gatekeepy people and the ones who were like least willing to kind of say like, oh, dude, you're trying to play like Detroit, like, yo, check, you hit this venue, it was like the rich kids who were like, oh, you just gotta know the right person, and it's like, well, but hello, the right person. Let's, and that's something I've pushed back on with like all my festival bookings, all my spreadsheets, with the exception of like my taxes. I tell all my musician friends, if you want them, hit me up. You're like, absolutely. Like, here's this contact list. Like that's, it's that or spend however much money on a freaking booker,
Yeah, which, they may not even reply anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That's super.
So you do all your own booking?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm a.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a, I run the business of like making music completely by myself. I do my own. I don't even have an accountant. It's like, a lot of it was like, again, kind of talking about this thing here. Like, I didn't have the means to like hire somebody else to help out, and a lot of the work right now is seeing if we can get to a position where like there's enough incentive there for somebody to want to come in and say, yeah, I'll take a piece of this pie that is now big enough for me to eat from.
Yes, that's some wisdom right there for sure. That's very cool. Do you think right now does Chicago have a sound that people are really after? And I'll say like Detroit, I think inevitably the garage rock sound is and has been probably popular since the Stooges and the MC5 kind of started. But of course with the White Stripes in the 90s, 2000s, and I don't know if it's just Gen Zers right now, if this is kind of the same thing in Chicago, being that the internet, there is no kind of like niche anything anymore. But is there anything, you can just elaborate on in Chicago? Are you seeing any kind of like budding new sounds or what's popular?
Budding, two answers to that question. I guess like what's popular in Chicago. There's definitely still like a kind of alt country bent, kind of Wilco-y thing that I think is still very popular and very celebrated. Sam joined the band because he was playing lap steel, and now
He's in Wilco?
No. He joined this band because he was playing lap steel, and our joke was like, okay, let's stop being another band in Chicago that has a lap steel player.
Okay. So the Wilco vibe is very overdone. Can I say overdone?
Yeah, in some places, and it's again, it's no like there's. I look at it like when I moved to Chicago to play jazz, it was like everybody I talked to was like, you're like, that's it. You want to play jazz here? That's what you've got to do. You shouldn't really be playing other stuff. You should just be shedding the Wayne Shorter tunes for 6 hours a day. And it was like, It was very like dogmatic like that. And that has thankfully kind of evaporated. And a lot of what I think about is like exciting for me right now in Chicago is like some of the younger jazz inspired folks. I think about like there's this great band called Mixed Memories who back up a bunch of other like singers and MCs like Sen Morimoto and Shawnee Dez and a bunch of people in town, and they're doing this like punky jazz, very proggy kind of fusion thing that is like it's music. The best way to describe it is it's like music you can get away with recording on your iPhone, because like the raw energy in the room and like virtuosity of the players is like so evident that it doesn't matter how many mics you've got on it. It's like it is always cool and incredible. I'm trying to think what else is happening. And yeah, one of you guys want to chime in? Yeah, Namdi stuff is like that too, where it's very like it's like pop, prog, avant-garde, math rocky. Like there's so much stuff in his music that's so cool.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. Next, I would love to hear a really famous song by another Chicago band, the Beatles.
It's another Chicago band.
Yeah, I was just kidding.
Liverpool, Chicago?
Liverpool, Illinois.
Liverpool, Chicago. Didn't they invent the Chicago dogs?
They're the Chicago dogs invented by John Lennon.
Yeah.
The celery salt was Ringo's idea.
We worked up a little cover.
Eleanor Rigby, right? When you broke down that math rock lick and then you did like the Midwest emo, and I'm like, this is awesome. Thanks so much for that cover.
Yeah, totally.
That great Chicago band, the Beatles. It's too bad that they had to split before we could all see them.
The Chicago invasion.
The Chicago. Yeah, very cool. All right, well, great. Thanks so much for being here. This is our series here called Candid Conversations with Professional Musicians. We've already had some great conversation with everybody about their professionalism, about the careers that they're working on, that they're living. So the last question we have here today is based around that. So I'm going to ask Jake, how do you define success as a musician, and do you find that you are successful yet? Have you made this level of success that you were hoping for?
Nice. I think that my definition of success right now is a very simple one, and it's just about doing the thing every day and just making sure that you can find a way to do the thing every day. When I was younger, success was like the fame and the accolades and the money and the clout and the this and the that, and like I've been lucky enough to be able to like rub some shoulders with some people who feel pretty heavy to me, and a lot of what I've taken from conversations with them is that like the thing that keeps them going is just the act and the craft of it all itself. And so, yeah, I think in some ways I've definitely been able to find some success in that. I think the thing that I'm searching for now over the next couple years is like finding a way to make this thing that I do more of a less of a regular grind and more of like a deep sea fisherman kind of vibe, where
You can do the projects that you want to do and don't have to do the ones.
No, I'll still do the ones that I don't want to do, because every time I don't like what I'm doing or I'm frustrated about what's going on, I always ask myself, what is it that I'm supposed to learn from this, and that, like, the simplicity of that just kind of cuts through it all a lot of the time, because you're like any job, you're not going to like it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So specifically, more what I'm speaking to is like just practically to make enough money in the rest of the year, that rather than like freaking out every time all the gigs dry up every like January to like March, like make enough, harvest enough that can then be the time to say, okay, cool, I'm gonna double down on the craft side of it. I'm gonna get better at drums, or I'm gonna get better at producing, or I'm gonna write the next record. Or
so get comfortable enough money-wise to take a week off?
Get comfortable enough money-wise to take some months off.
Months off. Okay, yeah.
Well, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, a lot of times people don't go out to restaurants as much from January, February, March anyway. Right. The weather is a huge factor, I'm sure, here as is there. And after the holidays, people, tighten the belt a little bit on the spending. So the restaurants, of course, can't afford to pay people, right? It's a two-way street there. So I totally understand that side of it. So that's cool. But it is nice to look at it as an opportunity, like you kind of said, and write some tunes, learn something, maybe catch up with friends and family, right? All the things that maybe you're not doing. Cool. So I know I kind of interrupted you a little bit there. Any more you wanted to elaborate?
No, that was it. Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks so much. I don't know if you guys want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit too, Sam.
I'd be curious.
Sure.
You don't have to, but if you're curious,
Yeah,
to.
no, happy to. I would echo Jake. I think like if you are in a place where, or I'll speak reflexively, if I'm in a place where I feel like I can show up for my craft every day, I'm feeling pretty successful, just like on a day-to-day basis. More philosophically, I think if I'm making music that activates me and makes me feel something, and I'm making it with people who I admire and look up to and love to make that music with, that feels like it to me. And any, material success beyond that is sort of bonus. I mean, of course you got to eat. You got to eat, got to pay rent. Maybe one day it'd be nice to have the opportunity to have a kid.
It sounds like eating is that's the first level of success, that you're able to do that at least.
Exactly.
And then now you want to be able to focus on the things that your craft.
And I think anyone in the arts can say it's like the people who get to a point where they can just do one thing, like the Steve Lukather's or whatever, who are like, I'm just literally the best guitar player on the planet, and that's all I have to do. There's not that many of those people. And the rest of us, we learn how to put on different hats. And it's like we've all been saying, you're a producer, you're also a session player, you're also got your own band, and that's a piece of the pie, and you find ways to spread it out.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be too much a devil's advocate on it, but it's like Steve Lukather, of course, is your example, but that was of a time when he was a house session player, right? And how much of that even exists anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think there's very, very few and fewer than there were then of people who can be like, I'm the best at this thing and make a living at it. Just being really fast on the guitar is not enough anymore to make a household salary.
Yeah, I think I'm smiling because I'm going to say something that I'll probably regret, but it's like the Steve Lukathers of our generation, are they guitar influencers?
Man, I think, and maybe this is going to be a hot take, and I'm prepared to be canceled for it, but I think that they're, to the detriment of everyone's creativity, the format of always figuring out how to make the most out of 30 seconds or 60 seconds, I think it's ruining music. I think that putting so much energy in how to make something that's flashy and cool to look at because it's such a visual platform is destroying the way that we relate to music.
And then we're going to take that clip and it'll be a viral TikTok.
Yes. So thanks. I actually forgot I was going to ask you guys each for a hot take. So thanks for giving me yours. I kind of prompted it, I think. Nice. But no, I don't disagree with you, right? Because we are, we're here in our studio space. We're making YouTube videos. But, we're making things we like, but we're trying to figure out what do people want to relate to? What can we teach like budding guitar players or engineers? What's going to get us also under the nose of the clickbait stuff, right? And there's this dance.
And that's why we're doing this, is we like this long form, having a real conversation with people and hearing full songs and seeing a cover and multiple originals. But so many fewer people are going to watch the full form, and we'll get 100 times more views on our 10-second clips.
Totally.
But you have to do both. And we can do the stuff we care about, the longer form. And then we'll do the clips to bring people in.
Yeah, I don't begrudge anyone their successes. I'm coming from a very I listen to albums top down. That's how I have always related to music. So I fully acknowledge that my perspective is not everyone else's, and I don't, I won't say that I'm the arbiter of truth or whatever. But that's my soapbox.
Well, cool. Thanks so much. I appreciate that too. And I don't disagree with you. And I think a lot of people out there would also agree with you, just because we are all fighting the algorithm constantly, whatever that is, right? And you know, how many of us artists, you know, whatever, producers, engineers, art in any of these forms, are fighting for space in front of somebody's face, right? And that's kind of what this is you're trying to do something. You know, you have to get on a short, right, or a reel, you have to get somebody's attention within 1 second, because typically they're dropping off after 2 or 3 guaranteed, right? So if you don't have them captivated right away, they're gone, right? So it's tough, because now you're thinking that, but also everybody else is trying to do the same thing. And
Well, then all the stories sound the same if they all start with like a teaser. Like sometimes you need to build slowly and have a bigger payoff, and you can't do that with shorts. It's not possible.
yeah, because you know, for us, we have these performance videos. We've kind of done them more individual before this series. But I as a listener, I would like to hear like a pre-chorus into a chorus for a short. But I realize like the consumer doesn't care about that. They just want to hear the tag fast. So it's like it's almost like counterintuitive for me. Like, what part do I like the most? Now shorten that by, you know, another 2/3, and that's what I need to put out. And it feels like unfinished and like gross to me, because it's like I cut it off just before it got really good. But that's this teaser thing to bring the people in to listen to the full form or whatever.
Right. And I think that a lot of times my favorite songs are like, there's like one moment that sends shivers down my spine. But I don't think that if you listen to like that moment with like 3 seconds on either side, it's going to have the same impact. Like, you need to get there. And the context is what makes that moment possible. And I think, I don't know. I mean, personally speaking, like I've never really felt something from a reel, you know? Like, I close my eyes, put my headphones on, and listen to an album that I love, or listen to an album for the first time and maybe discover something that I come to love. It's a completely different experience.
Yes. You're making me think. The other day I made a post for you guys coming through, and I asked Jake what song to use. He said, I think Free. Was that right? Correct? I spent like 5 minutes trying to figure out what 30 seconds of that song I wanted with the post, because I really liked the beginning with like the math rock kind of lick and the way the drums come in and the voice, but it wasn't the chorus.
Right.
And so I kept doing this thing like, should I put the chorus on? Or should I put the part I just really dig right now? And it was like this dance, like how much do I get left or right? But it doesn't have the same effect if you're not listening it through. But, you know, it's this dance that we're playing, because unfortunately we all, if we want to promote ourselves, this is our platform, right? One of the social medias, and of course they're all different, but you know, I appreciate you bringing that up, because now, you know, I'm getting heated over here. Well, yeah, Sam, if you have some additional things you wanted to add to that question.
I mean, maybe this doesn't totally answer the question as far... Well, I guess starting on how I would define success, I think right now for me it feels like, also kind of echoing what both of these guys said, being able to figure out day to day, how do I continue to find joy in this process and keep that consistent? Because it's like, ultimately, why are you doing music if it doesn't make you happy? Because it is a grind. So there's that element for sure. I feel like in cities like Detroit and Chicago, even though we're not industry cities, the flip side of that is that we kind of have this unique ability to maybe like hold on to like counterculture even, but also just more generally speaking, we're not totally consumed by like a city like LA or New York or Nashville, which is super industry heavy, industry focused, which I feel like lets folks kind of create and pursue art in a way that's maybe a little more holistic to why people do it in the first place. And that to me ultimately speaks to like where creativity flourishes in its most, I don't know, pure way, I guess. Yeah.
Super cool. Do you have a hot take that you wouldn't mind sharing? I mean, I know we've already kind of all had a lot of things, but in the most clickbaity way, give us a hot take.
I mean, I have a drummer hot take.
Yeah,
Perfect.
If you are using the same brand of cymbals for your setup, you're really just kind of closing yourself in a way that I would say you're just missing out. I prefer to play, I don't know. I don't really think about the brand of cymbal I'm playing. I'm more so just thinking about how I think it sounds. I know people who like match their cymbals, so they're all like, oh, it's got to be all Zildjian, all Sabian, all Meinl. But I play a hodgepodge, and
Cool.
I feel that way about preamps. I don't use all the same kind of preamp. I want to use a Neve and an API.
There was like a long pause. I was like on the edge of my seat, wondering what you were gonna call those people, like beginners, right? Because they had like the cymbal
no,
packs.
it's not even beginners. That's most drummers. I feel like I know. And some people, I don't know. I feel like it's maybe like an OCD drummer thing. It's like you go behind a kid and you see all these different logos, and it looks weird or something. But
Yeah, I think the no logo vibe is cool. I mean, I see that mostly on your stuff, of
or
course.
the no logo. Yeah, these are mainly faded logos because I just choose not to clean the cymbals because I like how they sound.
Yeah, they look good. They sound great.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. All right, one last thing. You got to give me a hot take since I forgot to. Well, you don't have to, but if you want to, you've already told me a lot of stuff. But if you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it. If you want it.
What's gonna be my hot?
It could be good or bad. It could be like, I love Nickelback.
Man, I feel like I had a couple when this was going around, and I totally.
You were
lost
talking
it.
about Sabrina Carpenter yesterday.
Yeah, but that was not. I said I was like coming around on some of Sabrina Carpenter.
She was so good on SNL
She was great on SNL.
with Paul Simon.
With
I mean,
Paul Simon, yeah. I mean, Chapel's my girl. I'd love her music. I don't know if that's a hot take. My hot take is
Camera A, camera B, camera A.
my hot take is that and this is, I've been teaching a lot of these. I just don't get the Rolling Stones. That's like at all. That
Whoa.
music does nothing for me.
Dang.
Yeah, that's my hot take.
That's a pretty good hot take. That's a pretty good take. So Beatles or Stones, right?
Beatles are Kinks for sure.
Thanks so much for joining us today. This is Candid Conversations with professional musicians here at JK Knocking Studios outside of Detroit, Michigan. Thanks for being with us today. If you're still here, if you're enjoying this, please subscribe to our channel. Tell us what your favorite song was today of these guys, because they were all great and they're all a little different. If you're an artist out there watching and you want to be featured on this channel, we'd love to have you. Please reach out. We're going to have one more song here by these guys, and they're going to play us out with a real fun one here. You can see we have switched instruments here between our bass player and guitar player. We got some fun new things. And thanks so much, you guys, for being here. Appreciate all the great conversation.
Thank you for having us, man. This
It was a lot of fun. So take us out, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks a lot.
Your Savior's giving up, it's all an empty handful. Bruised and undercooked, false art and phony gold. Are you listening? Did the crackle capture the call? Was it missing after all? Each favors heading up, tall odds and broken bones. Truth soothed and overshook, false gods of phony gold. Are you listening? Did the crackle capture the call? Was it worth it after all? Don't bet a lot when you're not giving. You know that
Thanks so much for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. This
Thank
is
you
a
for
lot of
having us.
fun. Maiden King here from Chicago. All right. We'll see you next time.
We good? Sweet. That was a blast, guys. Thank you for having us. That was really cool.
A lot of great conversation there. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you.